Let's talk about something that I like to refer to as the myth of meritocracy. So, first of all, what is a meritocracy? Well, in a nutshell, it's simply the idea that the harder you work, the further you go. And actually, the best examples of pure meritocracies, in my opinion, sports. Because you work harder, you play harder, and you play smarter, and then you'll win. Okay, so those really are more pure meritocracies. But we have this problem in America where many people think that life in general, and specifically the economy, is a meritocracy. And you'll hear this opinion all the time from old school business conservatives who look at Wall Street and say that it's simply a meritocracy. When people make a lot of money on Wall Street, when people make a lot of money, period, it's simply because they worked harder and they cared more than other people. But here's the reality that nobody's going to tell you. Not only do we not have a meritocracy when it comes to the economy, I don't even think it's empirically possible to do it. You can't set up a system that's a real meritocracy. Now, why do I say that? Because how do you determine the amount of money that objectively makes sense for somebody to be paid for a given job? Now, libertarians fire back when we talk about this, and they say, well, it's just the market value. The market value is that. The market value is objectively what it's worth, and that's the end of the conversation. But that's totally flawed and totally backwards, because in a pure capitalist system, totally laissez-faire, no regulation whatsoever, what you have essentially is an oligarchy. You have a kleptocracy. You have a system where you'll have overlords and this ruling class where they own all the property, and the people in this case are property because they're renting themselves on the market for labor purposes. And what they'll do is they'll just keep down the wages. They'll just suppress the wages. And, I mean, you see that today. Today in America, and not even a totally free market, we have a minimum wage that's $7.25 when a living wage is $12 an hour. So you're going to sit there and tell me that that is objectively, empirically, what the value is of that person who's working a minimum wage job, that they're worth less than what a living wage is objectively. No, of course that's not true. Of course that's not true. It's arbitrary. Your market value is not equal to your value as a human being. That's very important. Libertarians completely overlook that, but that's the reality. And also, I mean, just think about it from a common sense perspective. So you're telling me that there are some people, like, what's the guy, I forgot his name, he's the owner of the largest cell phone company in the world, he lives in Mexico, and they all have his cell phones. He's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. So is it really true that some human beings, they're just objectively, that guy's worth $27 billion, and this person right here is worth negative $500,000 because they're in debt? So one person is totally useless and the other person is worth billions? But that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. And also, we've all met people, I know people, I've met them in my own life, where they'll work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, simply to pay the bills and keep the lights on. And then I have somebody else who's this guy who has a cushy office job, desk job, doesn't do much and makes $125,000 a year. So does that make sense, that the person who's working harder gets paid significantly less than the other person? It doesn't. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And even in terms of what you create for the marketplace, the amount that you're paid doesn't always reflect that. Not at all. So you can't set up a meritocracy. Now, here's what really goes into how much money you make. How rich are your parents? Who are your friends? How much status do you have? What opportunities were you presented with? How lucky are you? Are you outgoing and charismatic, or are you quiet and reserved? What schools did you go to? Is the business you're going into a booming or declining industry? Is the system rigged? I mean, the list goes on and on. There are simply too many variables for anybody to argue that anything is a meritocracy economically. So, what do we do with this information? That it's impossible to set up an economic meritocracy. Well, progressives have a very simple answer that I think makes perfect sense. What they say is, okay, we need to set up a society and set up a system where people's basic needs are met, and you have this thing called a social safety net. And you try to give people equal opportunity, not equality of outcome. Okay, that's more of a communist idea. We're talking about equal opportunity. So that's more of a social democratic idea. So you have education, you have healthcare, you have daycare, you have certain guaranteed minimum income where you're not going to starve in the street and die if all goes wrong. The society looks out for you to that extent. But after you have that minimum requirement met and you have that equality of opportunity, then it's on you. Then we should try to create a system that, as much as possible, can be a meritocracy. Because, look, the philosophical and theoretical idea of a meritocracy, I think, is a perfectly lovely idea in many ways. And I'm fine with trying to get a system like that, harness a system like that, but only insofar as you've already met people's basic needs, because that, to me, seems to be the only rational thing to do. So that would be my response to people who like to think that Wall Street today is a meritocracy and the economy today is a meritocracy. The answer is no, it's definitely not. But we should try to create as close as we can to a meritocracy, but only after you've met basic needs and you have a social safety net and you give equality of opportunity.